So we're going to start by talking about rumor, and we are all in the midst of rumor, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Everything about the coronavirus is rumor. We don't know whom to trust, and we don't know what to believe, and we hear contrary information, and that's exactly how this play begins. It begins with a character named Rumor appearing on stage with a coat covered with tongues. Open your ears, for which of you will stop the vent of hearing when loud rumor speaks? Right? You'll never guess what I just heard. Like Nancy just came up to me and said, psst, 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 psst. And I want to hear this. I from the Orient to the drooping west, making the wind my post horse, still, meaning always, unfold the acts commenced on this ball of earth. Upon my tongue's continual slanders ride, the which in every language I pronounce, stuffing the ears of men with false reports. I speak of peace, while covert enmity under the smile of safety wounds the world. And who but rumor, who but only I, make fearful musters and prepared defense, whiles the big year, swollen with some other grief, is thought with child by the stern tyrant war, and no such matter. Rumor is a pipe blown by surmises, jealousies, conjectures, and of so easy and so plain a stop, that the blunt monster with uncounted heads, the still discordant wavering multitude, can play upon it. But what need I thus my well-known body to anatomize among my household? Who's his household? Rumor's household is the audience, right? The crowd of people. Why is Rumor here? I run before King Harry's victory, who in a bloody field by Shrewsbury hath beaten down young Hotspur and his troops, quenching the flame of bold rebellion, even with the rebels' blood. And we saw that. That was the end of Henry IV, part 1. This is the beginning of part 2. But what mean I to speak so true at first? Wait a minute, I'm Rumor. I'm not supposed to tell you the truth. Although we know that part is true because we saw it. My office is to noise about that Harry Monmouth fell under the wrath of noble Hotspur's sword, and that the king, before the Douglas rage, stooped his anointed head as low as death. That is, the king is dead and the prince is dead, according to Rumor. This have I rumored through the peasant towns between that royal field of Shrewsbury and this worm-eaten hold of ragged stone, where Hotspur's father, old Northumberland, lies crafty sick. Now, do you remember that he didn't show up to Shrewsbury when he was expected, and it was a limb lopped off, as Hotspur said at the time? The posts come tiring on, and not a man of them brings other news than they have learned of me. From Rumor's tongues they bring smooth comforts false, worse than true wrongs. So they've heard what they think is good news, and it's going to turn out to be bad news. All right, the next scene. I have a choice with this play, or had when I was thinking about it, to do it quickly in one night or to spend 3 weeks on it, because in the Gloucester and Eastcheap scenes and all the kind of hilarity of the Falstaff world, just about every line needs a footnote of a page, because there's so many local and temporal, timely references that it would take forever to explain everything. So I decided we're going to kind of do some of those bits, but we're going to move through it pretty fast and get to the main thrust of the drama. So Northumberland hears the news about the death of his son, and he has a kind of wild reaction. At line, Act 1, Scene 1, line about 1:30. Northumberland speaks. He's finally convinced that Hotspur has died, the Douglas has been taken, fell off a cliff and hurt himself and got taken, and that Worcester is being sent to be executed. And so he falls into a kind of wild despair at first. He says, "For this I shall have time enough to mourn. In poison there is physic. And these news having been well, that would have made me sick, being sick have in some measure made me well. And as the wretch whose fever-weakened joints lie like strengthless hinges buckle under life, impatient of his fit, breaks like a fire out of his keeper's arms, even so my limbs, weakened with grief, being now enraged with grief, are thrice themselves. Hence, therefore, thou nice crutch. A scaly gauntlet now with joints of steel must glove this hand, and hence thou sickly coif," that is the headdress he wore when he was pretending to be sick. "Thou art a guard too wanton for the head which princes fleshed with conquest aim to hit. Now bind my brows with iron and approach the raggedest hour that time and spite dare bring to frown upon the enraged Northumberland. Let heaven kiss earth," that is, let the heavens fall. I was in Trader Joe's today, and there was a huge crowd, and there was a huge crowd in Ralph's. And there's half the shelves are empty of stuff, including toilet paper. And I said to one of the guys stocking the shelves, I said, "This is a remarkable crowd. Is it always like this on Thursday afternoon?" Or he said, "I got news for you. The sky is falling." So that's what it means. Let heaven kiss earth. Now let not nature's hand keep the wild flood confined. Let the water overwhelm the earth. Let order die. And let this world no longer be a stage to feed contention in a lingering act. But let one spirit of the firstborn Cain reign in all bosoms, that each heart being set on bloody courses, the rude scene may end, and darkness be the barrier of the dead. All right? "When I love thee not," says Othello, "chaos is come again." That's the mood here of Northumberland, hearing this bad news. And Travers says, "This strained passion doth you wrong, my lord." And Bardolph, Lord Bardolph now, not the character Bardolph that's the friend of Falstaff, "Sweet Earl, divorce not wisdom from your honor." And then they encourage him and they say, there's hope, we need to fight the king. So he's ready to raise forces to fight the king. And now we have Act 1, Scene 2, we turn to Falstaff.
So, can I just ask her?
Yeah.
So, kind of what did Northumberland expect when he deserted his son?
He didn't know what the outcome would be, but this is Northumberland, up and down, as a kind of parallel to Richard. He ran right straight to Bolingbroke early and helped put down Richard. Now he's turned against Bolingbroke, or Henry, and wishing he had Richard. And then he supports the rebellion of Hotspur and Worcester, and then he doesn't show up. And now he's going to go fight, and then he changes his mind. We'll see in 2 scenes. His daughter-in-law, who's Hotspur's widow, persuades him not to go. And he runs away to Scotland. So he's not a strong prop to trust, to rest on. And he's moody in this way and changeable. I mean, his character has changed a little since Richard II, where he was fairly powerful. Shakespeare changed his nature a bit for the purposes of this play. All right, so you've got this rebellion in the land, and rumor and expectation and false expectation at the level of the aristocrats. And now you're going to come to the low-life world of Falstaff, and you're going to see equally benighted world in a way, although highly entertaining, of course. So he's got a very short, small boy to be his page. And that's the point of the joke. Sirrah, you giant, what says the doctor to my water? He means his urine. Am I healthy? What's the diagnosis? The page. He said, sir, the water itself was a good, healthy water, but for the party that owed it, he might have more diseases than he knew for. Men of all sorts take a pride to gird at me, that is, make fun of me. The brain of this foolish compounded clay man is not able to invent anything that intends to laughter more than I invent, or is invented on me. I am not only witty in myself, but the cause that wit is in other men. This is a wonderful characterization of him. He's very witty himself, but he also is the object of other people's wit, as we've seen in the previous play. I do here walk before thee like a sow that hath o'erwhelmed all her litter but one. If the prince put thee into my service for any other reason than to set me off, that is, to be a contrast to me, why then I have no judgment. Thou horse and mandrake, thou art fitter to be worn in my cap than to wait at my heels. I was never manned with an agate till now. An agate stone is a little tiny thing, often carved with an image. All right, so he goes on and makes fun of the page. And then in comes the Chief Justice at line 51. And the page says, sir, here comes the nobleman that committed the prince for striking him about Bardolph. This is the Chief Justice who put Prince Hal in jail for hitting him, disobeying the king, his father, and the Chief Justice, fearless of the king, because he knew the king was just, put Hal in jail. Falstaff, wait close, I will not see him. Now, Falstaff is a knight, it's true, but the Lord Chief Justice is much higher in rank, but he's going to avoid him. He doesn't want to deal with justice. And that's partly why the justice isn't given a name. I don't think he's given a name. Is he given a name? Yeah, he's not given a name. And that's on purpose. So we keep hearing the word justice whenever he's around. What's he that goes there? Servant. Falstaff, and that's the justice's servant. Falstaff, and it please your lordship. He that was in question for the robbery, we know which robbery, that was the Gad's Hill robbery. He, my lord, but he hath since done good service at Shrewsbury, and as I hear, is now going with some charge to the Lord John of Lancaster. So the story is that he fought well at Shrewsbury. We know he didn't. We know he was pretending to fight, and he didn't fight. But there's rumor again, right? A false image of Falstaff's bravery. What, to York? Call him back again. Sir John Falstaff. Boy, tell him I am deaf, says Falstaff. Page, you must speak louder, my master is deaf. Chief Justice, I am sure he is to the hearing of anything good. Go, pluck him by the elbow, I must speak with him. Sir John, what? A young knave and begging? Is there not wars? Now he's pretending not to know who this servant of the Chief Justice is. And he's accusing him of being a beggar, plucking him by the elbow to get some money out of it. Is there not employment? Doth not the king lack subjects? Do not the rebels need soldiers? Though it be a shame to be on any side but one, it is worse shame to beg than to be on the worst side. Were it worse than the name of rebellion can tell how to make it. In other words, it's worse to be a beggar than to fight against the king. Now, this is obviously wrong, but Falstaff is trying to distance himself from the Chief Justice. Servant, you mistake me, sir. Why, sir, did I say you were an honest man? I didn't mistake you. I didn't say you were an honest man, meaning I'm accusing you of being dishonest. Setting my knighthood and my soldiership aside, I had lied in my throat if I had said so. Okay, you don't tell a knight that he lies unless you're ready to fight him. It's fighting words. But he's talking about himself. So you would say to a knight, setting your knighthood aside, let's not include that, you're a liar. So Falstaff is saying this about himself, setting my knighthood and my soldiership aside. Of course, his knighthood is questionable and his soldiership is nil. I had lied in my throat, but I'm not going to fight myself for saying so because I've set my knighthood aside. I pray you, sir, then set your knighthood and your soldiership aside and give me leave to tell you, you lie in your throat if you say I am any other than an honest man. I give thee leave to tell me so? I lay aside that which grows to me? If thou gett'st any leave of me. No, so I'm not going to put my knighthood aside to let you say that. If thou gett'st any leave of me, hang me. If thou takest leave, thou wert better be hanged. You hunt counter, hence, avaunt. Sir, my lord would speak with you. Chief Justice. Sir John Falstaff, a word with you. My good lord, says Falstaff, pretending to recognize him. God give your lordship good time of day. I am glad to see your lordship abroad. I heard say your lordship was sick. Did he? No. It's a rumor he just made up. But he'd love to be able to take the Chief Justice down a peg. I hope your lordship goes abroad by advice. Your lordship, though not clean past your youth, have yet some smack of age in you, some relish of the saltness of time in you, and I most humbly beseech your lordship to have a reverent care of your health. Now, Falstaff is probably significantly older than this Chief Justice. Sir John, I sent for you before your expedition to Shrewsbury. And it please your lordship, I hear his majesty is returned with some discomfort from Wales. He ignores him. Do you see that? I sent for you about I hear the king has come back from Wales. I talked not of his majesty. You would not come when I sent for you. And I hear, moreover, his highness has fallen into the same horse in apoplexy. Well, God mend him. I pray you, let me speak with you. This apoplexy, as I take it, is a kind of lethargy, and it please your lordship, a kind of sleeping in the blood, a hoarse and tingling. What tell you me of it? Be it as it is. I don't want to talk about the king's disease. It hath it original from much grief, from study and perturbation of the brain. I have read the cause of his effects in Galen. He's the ancient medical author. It is a kind of deafness, which is pretty funny because that's what Falstaff's pretending to. I think you are fallen into the disease, for you hear not what I say to you. Very well, my lord, very well. Rather, and it please you, it is the disease of not listening, the malady of not marking, meaning not paying attention, that I am troubled withal. To punish you by the heels would amend the attention of your ears, and I care not if I do become your physician. I'm going to punish you one of these days. I'm as poor as Job, but not so patient. So they go on with this kind of exchange. You've misled the prince, and he says, the young prince hath misled me. He calls himself young. With Falstaff 168, we that are in the wayward of our youth, I must confess, are wags too. Do you set down your name in the scroll of youth that are written down old with all the characters of age? And he describes them. Fie, Sir John. My lord, says Falstaff, I was born about 3 o'clock in the afternoon with a white head and something a round belly. For my voice, I have lost it with hallowing and singing of anthems, that is, hymns. To approve my youth further, I will not. The truth is, I am only old in judgment and understanding. And he that will caper with me for 1,000 marks, let him lend me the money and have at him. If somebody wants to bet me or dance on a bet, let him lend me the money and I'll dance with him on a bet. Well, of course, what he means is let him lend me the money and I'll run off with it. For the box of the year that the prince gave you, he gave it like a rude prince, and you took it like a sensible lord. I have checked him for it. No, that's not true. And the young lion repents. Marry, not in ashes and sackcloth, but in new silk and old sack. He's bought new clothes. He's getting drunk. That's how he's repenting for having hit you. So he's just maligning him and attacking him. Well, God send the prince a better companion. And Falstaff says, God send the companion a better prince. I cannot rid my hands of him. Well, the king hath severed you and Prince Harry. Now, we're seeing the effects of this in the play, because we don't see the prince and Falstaff together except once in the middle of the play, when the prince comes in with Poins in disguise for a moment, and they have some altercation, and then at the very end. So that, in a sense, the prince has separated himself already in a degree from Falstaff. I hear you are going with Lord John of Lancaster against the Archbishop and the Earl of Northumberland. Yea, I thank your pretty sweet wit for it. Okay. I would to God my name were not so terrible to the enemy as it is. They keep sending me on these battles because I'm such a great fighter. Well, be honest, and God bless your expedition. Will your lordship lend me £1,000 to furnish me forth? Not a penny, not a penny. You are too impatient to bear crosses, meaning coins with the cross on it. Fare you well, commend me to my cousin Westmoreland. He goes out, Falstaff, if I do, fillip me with a 3-man beetle. That is, beat me with a battering ram that takes 3 men to lift. A man can no more separate age and covetousness than it can part young limbs and lechery. But the gout galls the one and the pox pinches the other, and so both the degrees prevent my curses. Well, he's speaking truly there. Sir, what money is in my purse? 7 groats and 2pence. I can get no remedy against this consumption of the purse. How does he consume his purse? Buying things, especially drink. We saw examples of that. Borrowing only lingers and lingers it out, but the disease is incurable. Go, bear this letter to my Lord of Lancaster. So he doesn't go to Lord John of Lancaster, he just sends a letter to him. A pox of this gout, or a gout of this pox. For the one or the other plays the rogue with my great toe. What do you get the gout from? Overeating. What do you get the pox from? Oversleeping around. 'Tis no matter if I do halt, meaning limp. I have the wars for my color, and my pension shall seem the more reasonable. A good wit will make use of anything. I will turn diseases to commodity. So he's going to pretend to this disease so that he doesn't have to fight. All right, Archbishop and Mowbray comes in, Hastings. And I want just to read one speech from this scene. They're debating whether they're strong enough to fight the king without Northumberland's men. Do we have enough men? Do we have enough to succeed? And they're kind of back and forth about it. The Mowbray character is the son. Oh, is he here? No, he comes later. Yeah. Oh, he's here. The Mowbray character is the son of the Mowbray we saw in Richard II. Remember, who was banished and died abroad? He's the one that wanted to have that single fight with Bolingbroke under Richard the II. So this is his son. So he's got an ancient axe to grind with King Henry, right? All right, but I want to read the Archbishop's speech at line 86. He says, Hastings says, the Duke of Lancaster and Westmoreland against the Welsh himself and Harry Monmouth. So Prince Hal's brother, John of Lancaster, and Westmoreland have gone north to fight, they've gone to, let's see. Yeah, they've gone north to fight, and the king himself and Henry Monmouth, that's the prince, are gone south to fight against the Welsh, and then there's a third force leading the English against the French, and he doesn't know who's leading that. So the Archbishop says, let us on and publish the occasion of our arms. The Commonwealth is sick of their own choice. Their over-greedy love hath surfeited They're overfed with King Henry. An habitation giddy and unsure hath he that buildeth on the vulgar heart. He's talking about the multitude, right? The crowd, the mob. O thou fond many. And he can be saying this directly to the audience. With what loud applause didst thou beat heaven with blessing Bolingbroke, before he was what thou wouldst have him be? And being now trimmed in thine own desires, that is, decorated in your own desires, having what you wanted, thou beastly feeder art so full of him that thou provokest thyself to cast him up. You're provoking yourself to throw him up, to throw up. You've eaten too much, you want to throw up. You've had too much of Bolingbroke as King Henry, now you want to get rid of him. So, thou common dog, didst thou disgorge thy glutton bosom of the royal Richard, and now thou wouldst eat thy dead vomit up, and howlst to find it. So they spit out Richard, and they overate Bolingbroke, and now they want to spit out Bolingbroke and go back to find the Richard that they spit out. What trust is in these times? They that when Richard lived would have him die, are now become enamored on his grave. Thou that threwest dust upon his goodly head, when through proud London he came sighing on after the admired heels of Bolingbroke, criest now, O earth, yield us that king again, and take thou this. O thoughts of men accursed, past and to come seems best, things present worst. So this is revealing at two levels at least. One is it's the articulation of the danger of trusting the multitude, the danger of putting your hopes in the crowd. You remember how changeable the crowd was in Julius Caesar when they listened to Brutus and then they listened to Mark Antony when he sent them off in the opposite direction. Crowds are famously changeable, depending on who the last speaker was. So he's right about that. But what he doesn't notice is that he himself is guilty of the same thing. That is to say, he is turning against what is in prospect of change. He thinks he can reverse things by fighting.
Plebiscite to vote in Henry and get rid of Richard.
They didn't, but the people ran to Bolingbroke from Richard and supported his coming to power at all levels. And now they're raising armies against him. All right, Act 2, Scene 1. Fang, which is a lovely name for the what we would call a policeman, the sergeant of the sheriff, comes in to announce that they're looking for Falstaff and for the hostess herself because they're trying to get Falstaff arrested for the robbery. And she is complaining. She has brought them in. They were looking for him for the robbery before, but now she's gone and said, he stole money from me. He got me to change things into money and pay him, and he hasn't paid me back, and he's eating me out of house and home. That's her phrase. Let's read it from, they're at Pie Corner, which is, the inner city, we'll call it. Fang at line 42. Sir John, I arrest you at the suit of Mistress Quickly. Away, varlets, draw, Bardolph, cut me off the villain's head, throw the keen in the channel. Keen means the prostitute. He's accusing Mistress Quickly. Throw me in the channel, she says. I'll throw thee in the channel. Channel means the sewer, the open sewer in the middle of the street. That's how they got rid of sewage. They threw it in the street, and when it rained, it washed down into the river. You can imagine how London smelled at this time. Wilt thou, thou bastardly rogue? Murder, murder! Ah, thou honeysuckle villain. She means homicidal, and she is famous for her malapropisms. Enter the Lord Chief Justice. What's the matter? Keep the peace, ho. Hostess, good my lord, be good to me, I beseech you, stand to me. How now, Sir John, what are you brawling here? Doth this become your place, your time and business? You should have been well on your way to York. Stand from him, fellow, wherefore hangst upon him? Oh, my most worshipful lord, an't please your grace, I am a poor widow of Eastcheap, and he is arrested at my suit. So again, the Lord Chief Justice and Falstaff are at loggerheads. Now, why is Shakespeare doing this? Why does he keep putting these two together? Because Falstaff seems to be Prince Hal's intimate friend, and the Lord Chief Justice he punched in the mouth, and the Lord Chief Justice put him in jail. So they look like enemies. And these guys look like bosom buddies. But in fact, it's going to turn out to be just the opposite. He is arrested at my suit, Chief Justice, for what sum? Hostess, it is more than for some, my lord, it is for all I have. He hath eaten me out of house and home. Actually, that phrase existed before Shakespeare, but we only know it because Shakespeare made it famous. He hath put all my substance into that fat belly of his, but I will have some of it out again, or I will ride thee a nights like the mare. So they have some various quibbles. What is the sum that I owe you? Line 81. Marry, if thou wert an honest man, thyself and the money too, meaning he promised to marry her. Thou didst swear to me upon a parcel gilt goblet, sitting in my dolphin chamber, that's a room in her tavern that she owns, at the round table by the sea-coal fire upon Wednesday in Weeson week, when the prince broke thy head for liking his father to a singing man of Windsor. That's a scene we didn't see, but we get it from this. Thou didst swear to me then, as I was washing thy wound, to marry me and make me my lady thy wife. If you're the wife of a knight, you're called lady so-and-so. Can you deny it? My lord, says Falstaff. Now, in the age of the woke, or the Me Too's, listen to Falstaff. My lord, this is a poor mad soul, and she says up and down the town that her eldest son is like you. What does that mean? She's mad, and she goes around saying that you're the father of her child. She hath been in good case, I mean, she was well-to-do, and the truth is poverty hath distracted her. But for these foolish officers, I beseech you, I may have redress against them. Sir John, says the Chief Justice, I am well acquainted with your manner of wrenching the true cause the false way. It is not a confident brow, nor the throng of words that come with such more than impudent sauciness from you can thrust me from a level consideration, that is, a balanced judgment of you. You have, as it appears to me, practiced upon the easy yielding spirit of this woman, and made her serve your uses both in purse and in person. He's on to him, and he's right, of course, exactly right. All right.
Does Falstaff know that that he knows that he's onto him? Does he know it?
Well, yeah.
You think he gets it?
I mean, but Falstaff will never admit.
I think he thinks he's above that kind of.
Oh, he does. He thinks he's invulnerable. But why? Why does he think he's invulnerable? Why does Falstaff think he's invulnerable to the Chief Justice?
Yeah, he thinks he's invulnerable because he's close to him.
Yes, exactly. My bosom buddy's going to be the next King of England. I can do what I want. Okay. So then a little further down, he takes her aside and convinces her to sell what she's got, that he will marry her, that he needs money. In other words, she falls for it again. She keeps falling for it. In faith, I'm loath to pawn my plate, so God save me. Let it alone, I'll make other shift. You'll be a fool still. That is, okay, forget it, I'm out of here. And she says, no, 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 well, you shall have it, though I pawn my gown. I hope you'll come to supper, you'll pay me altogether. Will I live? Meaning if I live, I'll pay you. Ha! Hook on, hook on. All right, then they go out, the hostess and the sergeant and Fang and Bardolph go out, and the Chief Justice says, I have heard better news from somebody that's come in to, a messenger, Gower, has come to give him news. And Falstaff asks him, what's the news, my lord? And the Chief Justice ignores him. Where lay the king last night? And they go on, he goes on talking to Gower and not paying attention to Falstaff. And then Falstaff says at 171, my lord, Chief Justice, what's the matter? And then he turns to Gower. Master Gower, shall I entreat you with me to dinner? Gower says, I just got invited to dinner invited to go with the Chief Justice, and so now Falstaff is talking only to Gower and not to the... So what just happened? The Lord Chief Justice, because of serious business, is paying attention to the messenger and not to Falstaff. So what does Falstaff do? He gets his attention, and then he pays attention to the messenger and not to the Lord Chief Justice, to punish him for ignoring him. And then he says at 183, telling us what he's done. This is the right fencing grace, my lord, tap for tap, and so part fair. You ignored me while I was trying to get the news from you, so I ignored you while you were trying to get my attention. We're even. And the Chief Justice says, now the Lord lighten thee. Thou art a great fool. Okay, it's one thing for the Lord Chief Justice to ignore this lowlife because he's got important news about the king. It's another thing for Falstaff to insult the Lord Chief Justice. All right, Act 2, Scene 2 opens in the prince's chambers, and Poins is there, but not Falstaff. And they have a pretty interesting discussion, and we're going to take it up at line about 30. Shall I tell thee one thing, Poins, says the prince. Poins, yes, faith, and let it be an excellent good thing. Prince, it shall serve among wits of no higher breeding than thine. Go to, I stand the push of your one thing that you will tell. Prince, marry, I tell thee, it is not meet that I should be sad now my father is sick. Albeit I could tell to thee, as to one it pleases me for fault of a better to call my friend, I could be sad, and sad indeed, too. Very hardly upon such a subject. Why would you be sad? You're going to be the next king. By this hand, he swears, thou thinkest me as far in the devil's book as thou and Falstaff for obduracy and persistency. Let the end try the man. Try meaning try like in a court of law or test. Let's see if I'm as far gone as you guys by what comes of it. It's just the reminder of what he said in the soliloquy in the first play, right? I know you all and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness. Let the end try the man. But I tell thee, my heart bleeds inwardly that my father is so sick. And keeping such vile company as thou art, hath in reason taken from me all ostentation of sorrow. That is presenting to the world the look of sorrow. The reason? What wouldst thou think of me if I should weep? I would think thee a most princely hypocrite. It would be every man's thought. And thou art a blessed fellow to think as every man thinks. Never a man's thought in the world keeps the roadway better than thine. Every man would think me an hypocrite indeed. And what excites your most worshipful thought to think so? Poins. Why, because you have been so lewd and so much engraft to Falstaff and to thee. By this light I am well spoke on. I can hear it with my own ears, etc. All right, what has the prince just revealed to us? That inside, of course, he's sad at his father's sickness, but he's not showing it. And he's not showing it Because as Poins says, if he did, everyone would think him a hypocrite. And he doesn't want people to think that. He is, of course, being a hypocrite in another sense, right? He's pretending to be this wastrel in the taverns of London, when in fact that's not his real character at all. So in comes Bardolph to report on Falstaff, and at line 94, Poins says, "How doth the Martelmas, your master?" The Martelmas beef, it's a big piece, it's a big beef that's fattened up for the festival at Martelmas, the holiday. The day of St. Martin, November 11th. In bodily health, sir, marry, the immortal part, this is about Falstaff, the immortal part needs a physician, but that moves not him. Though that be sick, it dies not. That is, Falstaff's spirit needs a physician, not his body. I do allow this Wen to be as familiar with me as my dog, and he holds his place, for look you how he writes. Falstaff writes to the prince. Poins reads, "John Falstaff, knight, every man must know that, as oft as he has occasion to name himself, even like those that are kin to the king, for they never prick their finger, but they say, 'There's some of the king's blood spilt.' 'How comes that?' says he that takes upon him not to conceive. The answer is as ready as a borrower's cap. 'I am the king's poor cousin, sir.'" What's he talking about? Do you get it? If you're a relative of the king, and you prick your finger and it's bleeding, you will be quick to say, "Oh, there's some royal blood." And the person who pretends not to know what you mean says, "What do you mean, royal blood?" "Oh, I'm a cousin of the king." "Oh." So Falstaff is doing the same thing, proclaiming himself knight every time he writes a letter. "Sir John Falstaff," reads the prince, "knight, to the son of the king, nearest his father Harry, Prince of Wales, greeting." "Why," says Poins, "this is a certificate." "Peace, be quiet." "I will imitate the honorable Romans in brevity." Poins, here he sure means brevity in breath, short-winded. That is, for certain he means he's short-winded because he's so fat. Prince reads on, "I commend me to thee, I commend thee, and I leave thee. Be not too familiar with Poins, for he misuses thy favor so much that he swears thou art to marry his sister Nell. Repent at idle times as thou mayest, and so farewell. Thine by yea or no, which is as much as to say as thou usest him, Jack Falstaff, with my familiars, John with my brothers and sisters, and Sir John with all Europe." "My lord, I'll steep this letter in sack and make him eat it." Prince, "That's to make him eat 20 of his words. But do you use me thus, Ned?" Ned points. "Must I marry your sister? God send the wench no worse fortune, but I never said so." So then they decide they're going to dress up as drawers, that is waiters in the tavern, and go down and sneak in and watch Falstaff. So they put on leather jerkins and aprons, and the prince says at line 162, "From a god to a bull, a heavy dissension. It was Jove's case, that is, Jupiter took the form of a bull in order to seduce Europa. From a prince to apprentice, a low transformation. That shall be mine, for in everything the purpose must weigh with the folly." Follow me, Ned. The purpose must weigh with the folly. What does he mean? This is ridiculous, yeah?
The ends justify the means.
Not universally the ends justify, but the folly that I commit by lowering myself in this way can only be judged in the whole context as we're going to see it unfold by the end.
So by doing this, the king is not really lessening his power.
Correct. Not just he's not even lessening not just his power, but his honor. Okay. It looks like he's doing something dishonorable, but the purpose is great.
Stefan is being betrayed.
Is what?
Stefan is being betrayed by
Yeah, but it's also to continue this disguise to keep the surprise for the end. All right. Act 2, Scene 3. I'm just going to read Lady Percy in Northumberland from line 9. He's about to go off to war, and she can't stand it that he's going to go to war when he didn't go for his son, her husband. She says, "Oh, yet for God's sake, go not to these wars. The time was, Father, that you broke your word when you were more endeared to it than now. When your own Percy, when my heart's dear Harry, threw many a northward look to see his father bring up his powers, but he did long in vain. Who then persuaded you to stay at home? There were 2 honors lost, yours and your son's. For yours, the God of heaven brightened it. For his, it stuck upon him as the sun in the grey vault of heaven. And by his light did all the chivalry of England move to do brave acts. He was indeed the glass wherein the noble youth did dress themselves. He had no legs that practiced not his gait. That is, he who practiced not the way Hotspur walked didn't have legs. He only didn't practice the way he walked because they didn't have legs. And speaking thick, which nature made his blemish, became the accents of the valiant." They took on his speech habits too. He was I'm going down a little, line 31. "He was the mark and glass, copy and book that fashioned others. And him, O wondrous him, O miracle of men, him did you leave, second to none, unseconded by you. To look upon the hideous god of war in disadvantage, to abide a field where nothing but the sound of Hotspur's name did seem defensible. So you left him. Never, oh never, do his ghost the wrong, to hold your honor more precise and nice with others than with him. Let them alone. The Marshal and the Archbishop are strong. Had my sweet Harry had but half their numbers today, had my sweet Harry had but half their numbers, today might I, hanging on Hotspur's neck, have talked of Monmouth's grave." Monmouth is Prince Hal. "Beshrew your heart, fair daughter," says Northumberland, "you do draw my spirits from me, with new lamenting ancient oversights. But I must go and meet with danger there, or it will seek me in another place, and find me worse provided." Lady Northumberland, his wife, "Oh, fly to Scotland, till that the nobles and the armed commons have of their puissance made a little taste." Go hide in Scotland until you see whether your guys are going to win or not. "Lady Percy, if they get ground and vantage of the king, then join you with them, like a rib of steel to make strength stronger. But for all our loves, first let them try themselves. So did your son, he was so suffered. So came I, a widow, and never shall have length of life enough to reign upon remembrance with mine eyes, that it may grow and sprout as high as heaven for recordation to my noble husband." And guess what? He's persuaded. "Come, come, go in with me. 'Tis with my mind as with the tide swelled up unto his height, that makes a still stand, running neither way. The tide comes in and stops, and then it goes out. And I'm between those tides, the movements of the tide. Fain would I go to meet the Archbishop, but many thousand reasons hold me back. I will resolve for Scotland. There am I till time and vantage crave my company." So he decides not to go, not to bring his powers again, and go hide in Scotland.
I guess I don't really get what Lady Percy is getting at.
How can you go fight for these guys when you didn't go fight for Hotspur and he died? Aren't you ashamed of yourself? How could you possibly? And also, he's her only prop now, right? She's the widow of Hotspur, his son. So he keeps the household going. She's got nothing without him. So she wants to protect him, and so does his wife. All right, now the scene in the tavern. It's really impossible to do justice to this. What time is it? How much time? Act 2, Scene 4. So I'll read little bits of it, and then we're going to skip ahead, because there's no way I could make it all significant. But, so we know who Mistress Quickly is. She's the hostess of the tavern. She's honest, but she's easily swayed. And Doll Tearsheet is a prostitute who's got, some strength and fight in her. And Falstaff and she are constantly calling each other names. Falstaff comes in saying, "Empty the Jordan." The Jordan is the name of the chamber pot in the other room. "A pox damn you, you muddy rascal, is that all the comfort you give me?" Line 37. He's made a pun on calm and qualm, which were pronounced the same. "A pox damn you, muddy rascal, is that all the comfort?" Falstaff, "You make fat rascals, Mistress Doll. I do make them. Gluttony and diseases make them. I make them not. If the cook help me to help to make the gluttony, you help to make the diseases, Doll. If the cook helps feed the fat, then you feed the disease-ridden with sexual diseases. We catch of you, Doll, we catch of you. Grant that, my poor virtue, grant that. Yea, joy our chains and our jewels. You take our chains and our jewels, all our riches, which is to say their use of their bodies. By my troth, says the hostess, this is the old fashion, with them fighting again. That's nice to hear. One must bear, and that must be you, to Doll. You are the weaker vessel. Can a weak, empty vessel bear such a huge, full hogshead? There's a whole merchant's venture of Bordeaux stuff in him. You have not seen a hulk better stuffed in the hold. Come, I'll be friends with thee, Jack. Thou art going to the wars, and whether I shall ever see thee again or no, there's nobody cares. Now, when a prostitute says that, does she mean it? Later in the scene, when he is leaving for the wars, she's weeping. There's a connection here. But she's raucous and rough. Then Pistol wants to come in. Now, Pistol is carefully named, and there are a whole set of puns on Pistol. The gun, charging the gun, but also with all kinds of sexual innuendos. I will discharge upon her, Sir John, with 2 bullets. She is pistol-proof, sir. You shall hardly offend her. So the hostess doesn't want a swaggerer in her tavern. It gives her a bad reputation. She's, of course, completely ignoring the fact that Falstaff is the great swaggerer, but Pistol is an even greater, wilder, more braggart soldier kind of swaggerer. And she doesn't want him to come in, but he comes in, and then he starts a brawl, and they drive him out with swords. At line, Pistol goes out at line 191 or so, and Doll says, I pray thee, Jack, be quiet. The rascal's gone. Ah, you whoreson little valiant villain, you. Hostess, are you not hurt in the groin? Methought a made a shrewd thrust at your belly. No, he didn't. Have you turned him out of doors? Yes, sir, the rascal's drunk. You have hurt him, sir, in the shoulder. A rascal to brave me? Ah, you sweet little rogue, you, alas, poor ape, how thou sweatest. Come, let me wipe thy face. Come on, you horse and chops. Ah, rogue, in faith I love thee. Thou art as valorous as Hector of Troy, worth 5 of Agamemnon, and 10 times better than the 9 worthies. I will read you the list of the 9 worthies, famously. Hector, Alexander, Julius Caesar, Joshua, David, Judas Maccabeus, King Arthur, Charlemagne, and Godfrey of Bouillon. And they were famous. And there's a little play within the play of the 9 worthies in one of the comedies. They called for music. Enter behind, line 216, 17, enter behind Prince Henry and Poins disguised. So now we have jokes about dramatic irony. Peace, good doll. Do not speak like a death's head. Do not bid me remember mine end. She's been reminding him that he's going to judgment someday. And then Doll, who recognizes that the prince has come, she's in on it, says, Sirrah, what humor is the prince of? So she's egging him on. He doesn't know the prince is there. A good shallow young fellow, I would have made a good pantler. I would have chipped bread well. He would have made a good pantry man, that is a server in a tavern. It's not accidental that he calls him shallow. Later we're going to see somebody named Shallow. Then she says, also egging him on, they say Poins has a good wit. Hey, a good wit? Hang him, baboon. His wit's as thick as Tewkesbury mustard. There's no more conceit in him than is in a mallet. That is, he has no more witty, inventive possibility in his mind than in a wooden hammer. Why does the prince love him so then? Because their legs are both of a bigness, and it plays at quoits well, and eats conger and fennel, and drink off candles' ends for flapdragons, and rides the wild mare with the boys, and jumps upon joint stools, and swears with a good grace, and wears his boots very smooth, like unto the sign of the leg, and breeds no bait with telling of discreet stories. And such other gambol faculties has, that show a weak mind and an able body, for the which the prince admits him. For the prince himself is such another. The weight of a hair will turn the scales between their avoirdupois. The prince comes forward. Or no, he says to Poins, would not this knave of a wheel have his ears cut off? This is a specific punishment. Wait 1 second. A Star Chamber penalty for defaming royalty. You defame royalty, you have your ears cut off. That's like standard punishment. Would not this knave of a wheel have his ears cut off? Let's beat him before his whore. That's the punishment for incontinence. Usually applied to prostitutes, but also here applied to the John. Look whether the withered elder hath not his poll clawed like a parrot. Doll Tearsheet is rubbing his head. Falstaff, kiss me, doll. Prince, Saturn and Venus this year in conjunction. What says the almanac to that? I kiss thee with the most constant heart, she says, and he says, I am old. I am old. She says, I love thee better than I love e'er a scurvy young boy of them all. What stuff wilt have a kirtle of? I'm going to buy you a girdle or a kirtle. What do you want it to be made of? I shall receive money a Thursday to take soldiers to the north to fight with. Shalt have a cap tomorrow, a merry song, come, it grows late, will to bed. Thou'lt forget me when I'm gone. So he's caught, he's drunk, of course, he's caught between, braggadocio on the one hand and melancholy, sadness, because he's getting old and he's been drinking. Thou'lt forget me when I'm gone. She says, by my troth, thou'lt set me a-weeping, and thou sayest so. Prove that ever I dress myself handsome till thy return. Well, hearken to the end. Listen to the end. That idea picks up what the prince said, right? Judge my folly by the end I'm going to put it to. It's a kind of echo here. But she really will miss him, she says. Some sack, Francis, says Falstaff. And Prince and Poins come out saying, what? Anon, sir. Do you remember that line?
Yeah.
They
kept calling him.
They offered the drawer, Francis, £1,000, and he says, anon, meaning pretty soon, right away. So now they reveal themselves. And Falstaff calls him, ha, a bastard son of the king's, and art not thou Poins his brother? Prince, why, thou globe of sinful continence, what a life dost thou lead? So remember I said, all through the prince is poking at Falstaff, condemning him, attacking him, chastising him for his immoral behavior and his self-indulgence. He's still doing it. What a life dost thou lead, Falstaff, a better than thou. I am a gentleman, thou art a drawer. Because he's dressed as a drawer. Very true, sir, and I come to draw you out by the ears. Hostess, oh, the Lord preserve thy good grace. By my troth, welcome to London. Now the Lord bless that sweet face of thine. Oh, Jesu, are you come from Wales? Falstaff, thou horse and mad compound of majesty, by this light flesh and corrupt blood thou art welcome. How, you fat fool, I scorn you. My lord, he will drive you out of your revenge and turn all to merriment if you take not the heat. That is, if you don't punish him right now for what he just said about you, he's going to turn it all to a joke and you're not going to have any way to punish him. Prince, line 280. You horse and candle, mind you, how vilely did you speak of me even now before this honest, virtuous, civil gentlewoman? Honest, virtuous, civil gentlewoman, meaning doll tear sheet, a prostitute, not at all virtuous, and wild. Hostess, God's blessing of your heart, and so she is by my troth. Well, that's not quite true. Falstaff, didst thou hear me? That is, you heard what I said about you? Yea, and you knew me as you did when you ran away by Gad's Hill, right? You knew I was at your back, and spoke it on purpose to try my patience. Because at Gad's Hill, remember, oh, I knew who you were the whole time, which he didn't. And now again, he's going to lie and say that. Falstaff, remembering that he was caught in that lie, says, no, not so. I did not think thou wast within hearing. I shall drive you then to confess the willful abuse, and then I know how to handle you. You're going to confess that you called the Prince of Wales names, and now I'll know how to handle you, meaning cut off your ears. No abuse, Hal, mine honor, no abuse. Not to dispraise me and call me pattler and bread chipper, and I know not what? No abuse, Hal. Poins, no abuse. No abuse, Ned, in the world. Honest Ned, none. I dispraised him before the wicked, that the wicked might not fall in love with him. In which doing I have done the part of a careful friend and a true subject, and thy father is to give me thanks for it. No abuse, Hal, none, Ned, none. No faith, boys, none. Prince, see now whether pure fear and entire cowardice doth not make thee wrong this virtuous gentlewoman to close with us. Is she of the wicked? That is, I did it to keep the wicked from falling in love with you. He says, oh, you're calling her wicked? Is thine hostess here of the wicked? Or is thy boy of the wicked? Or honest Bardolph, whose zeal burns in his nose, of the wicked? Now, it's not zeal that burns in Bardolph's nose. What is it? Liquor. Poins, answer, thou dead elm, answer. Falstaff, the fiend hath pricked down Bardolph irrecoverable, and his face is Lucifer's privy kitchen, where he doth nothing but roast malt worms. For the boy, there is a good angel about him, but the devil blinds him too. Prince, for the women? For one of them, she is in hell already and burns poor souls. That is, she gives the Johns venereal disease. For the other, I owe her money, and whether she be damned for that, I know not. Hostess, no, I warrant you. Okay. We're going to skip ahead. Act 3, Scene 1. So what's going on here? At the level of the rebellion, the formal rebellion, we have a kind of chaos of vision and loyalties and morality, self-seeking at a very high level. And in the tavern at Eastcheap, we have this kind of Falstaffian self-indulgence at the lowest level. But in both cases, at these opposite levels of society, we have this self-indulgence that to which England is not to be trusted. You don't want to trust England to a Northumberland. You don't want to trust England to a Falstaff. Act 3, Scene 1, enter the king. Does anybody need a break? Okay. He sends a page to call in some of the lords, And he has a soliloquy. This is King Henry IV now. Bolingbroke that was. How many thousand of my poorest subjects are at this hour asleep? Oh, sleep, gentle sleep, nature's soft nurse, how have I frighted thee, that thou no more wilt weigh my eyelids down and steep my senses in forgetfulness. Why rather sleep liest thou in smoky cribs, upon uneasy pallets stretching thee and hushed with buzzing night flies to thy slumber, than in the perfumed chambers of the great, under the canopies of costly state, and lulled with sound of sweetest melody. Why does sleep come to the lowest of the low, sleeping on a wooden pallet, and it doesn't come to a king sleeping in these riches? O thou dull god, why liest thou with the vile in loathsome beds, and leavest the kingly couch a watch case or a common larum bell? Wilt thou upon the high and giddy mast seal up the shipboy's eyes, and rock his brains in cradle of the rude imperious surge, and in the visitation of the winds, who take the ruffian billows by the top, curling their monstrous heads and hanging them with deafening clamor in the slippery clouds that with the hurly death itself awakes? Canst thou, O partial sleep, give thy repose to the wet sea sun in an hour so rude, and in the calmest and most stillest night, with all appliances and means to boot, deny it to a king? Then happy low, lie down. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown. The boy at the top of the mast of a ship in a storm will sleep up there if he has to. But the king can't sleep.
Richard kind of said the same thing at one point.
Yeah.
Humble.
Eventually he did. Yeah. Not with the same self-knowledge. Until the end. All right, they're worried about the king. He's got a kind of apoplexy. He needs to rest. And the king says, let's see. The king says the kingdom is sick, and they say, no, I mean, the kingdom is there's danger near the heart of the kingdom, and Warwick says it is but a body distempered, which to former strength may be restored. There's hope the kingdom can be put back together. And the king says at line 45, O God, that one might read the book of fate, and see the revolution of the times make mountains level, and the continent, weary of solid firmness, melt itself into the sea. So this is what Northumberland in his rage wanted to happen, chaos. And the king is using some of the same images to say, if only we could know what was going to happen. And other times to see the beachy girdle of the ocean too wide for Neptune's hips, how chances mock and changes fill the cup of alteration with divers liquors. Oh, if this were seen, that is, if we could see how mutability changes things. The happiest youth, viewing his progress through, what perils past, what crosses to ensue, would shut the book and sit him down and die. If you knew what was going to happen, all the terrible things, all the changes, you'd give it up. 'Tis not 10 years gone since Richard and Northumberland, great friends, did feast together, and in 2 years after were they at wars. It is but 8 years since this Percy was the man Northumberland, was the man nearest my soul, who like a brother toiled in my affairs and laid his love and life under my foot. Yea, for my sake, even to the eyes of Richard gave him defiance. But which of you was by? He's trying to remember who was there at the time. You, Cousin Neville, as I may remember, to Warwick. When Richard, with his eye brimful of tears, then checked and rated by Northumberland, did speak these words, now proved a prophecy. Now Shakespeare remembers what he wrote in Richard II, and he's quoting it pretty close. Northumberland, thou ladder by the which my cousin Bolingbroke ascends my throne, though then God knows I had no such intent, But that necessity so bowed the state that I and greatness were compelled to kiss. The time shall come, said Northumberland then. Thus did he follow it. The time will come that foul sin gathering head, meaning army, shall break into corruption. So went on, foretelling this same time's condition and the division of our amity. To which Warwick responds, there is a history in all men's lives, figuring the nature of the times deceased, the which observed a man may prophesy with a near aim of the main chance of things, and yet not come to life, which in their seeds and weak beginnings lie in treasure it. That is, with some knowledge of the past, you can sort of guess what's going to happen in the future, even though it hasn't happened yet. Such things become the hatch and brood of time, and by the necessary form of this, King Richard might create a perfect guess that great Northumberland, then false to him, would of that seed grow to a greater falseness, which should not find a ground to root upon unless on you. That is, Richard might have predicted this not because he knew the future, but because seeing what was happening then and knowing the past, he might guess at this. And seeing that it was necessary. And the king says, are these things then necessities? Then let us meet them like necessities. And that same word even now cries out on us. They say the Bishop of Northumberland are 50,000 strong, and they talk about, oh, it cannot be, says Warwick, my lord, rumor doth double, like the voice and echo the numbers of the feared. So the king is saying, oh, are there necessities? Okay, then we have to meet necessity. So we're not renouncing free will here in the face of necessity. You can't do anything about necessity. If necessity arises, you have to meet it. That's what he did then, and that's what he's saying we have to do now. Warwick, please it your grace to go to bed. Upon my soul, my lord, the powers that you already have sent forth shall bring this prize in very easily. To comfort you, the more I have received a certain instance that Glendower is dead, no more fighting in the south. Your majesty hath been this fortnight ill, and these unseasoned hours perforce must add unto your sickness. King, I will take your counsel, and were these inward wars once out of hand, we would, dear lords, unto the Holy Land. He still wants to do this pilgrimage if he can. All right, now we're in Gloucester. Gloucestershire is where Shakespeare grew up. And we've got these hilarious characters, Shallow, Justice of the Peace, Shallow, and his cousin Silence, who bursts out in song at the end of the later scene, ironically. And they're picking over the passage of time. They're old. Shallow's old, like Falstaff. And he's remembering the good old times. And he's he says, in the old days, well, let's start at line 14. You were called lusty Shallow then, cousin. By the mass I was called anything, and I would have done anything indeed too, and roundly too. Shallow is shallow. When he gets a joke, he has to point out what the meaning of the joke is, etc. And I would have done anything too, and roundly too. There was I, and little John Doyd of Staffordshire, and Black George Barnes, and Francis Pickbone, and Will Squeal, a Cotswold man. You had not four such swingebucklers. Swingebucklers means beating the buckler of somebody who's got a sword and buckler. And it comes to mean what we mean by swashbuckler. And I must say to you, we knew where the bonarobas were, the pretty dresses, and had the best of them all at commandment. Then was Jack Falstaff, now Sir John, a boy, and page to Thomas Mowbray, Duke of Norfolk. Falstaff, as a boy, was page to that Mowbray that we saw banished by Richard II. This Sir John cousin that comes hither anon about soldiers, the same Sir John, the very same. I see him break Scogan's head at the court gate when it was a crack not thus high. And the very same day did I fight with one Samson Stockfish, a fruiterer behind Gray's Inn. Jesu, Jesu, the mad days that I've spent, and to see how many of my old acquaintance are dead. We shall all follow, cousin. Certain, 'tis certain, very sure, death, as the psalmist saith, is certain to all shall die. How a good yoke of bullocks at Stamford Fair. Okay, there are many points in the Psalms where all men will die, but in Ecclesiasticus it also says this: how can he get wisdom that holdeth the plough, and his talk is but of the breeding of bullocks? So he's sorrowing over the dead that he knew, but instead of turning it to account or getting any wisdom, he just goes and asks, how much does a pair of bullocks cost at the town fair, at the Stamford Fair? Death is certain, he says. Is old Double of your town living yet? Dead, sir. Jesu, Jesu, dead. I drew a good bow and dead. He drew a very good bow and now he's dead? How is it possible? Then he says, a score of good ewes may be worth 10 pounds. Silence. How a score of ewes now? 20 female sheep. And is old Double dead? So in come Bardolph announcing Sir John Falstaff. Why is he here? He's here to get soldiers. And so I'm not going to go through all this, but basically, who does he take with him? Well, let's look at their names. First of all, there's Moldy. Moldy is strong, but he's not used in the army. He's not going to go if he can avoid it. He's a good-limbed fellow. So at first Falstaff says, prick him, meaning stick a pin by his name on the list. Check him off, we want him. He says, I was pricked well enough before and you could have let me alone, line 109. So the triple meanings going on here. I was marked down okay. I had enough troubles in my life, pricks and thorns in my life, and I was well hung before you take me off to the war. And then we go to Shadow. Now, the Shadow was the name of any false name on an army list. So if you were an immoral captain, you would put down the name of somebody that didn't exist, and then you'd get paid for having the guy on your list. And those were called shadows. And so there's this actual person called Shadow, and he's called Shadow because he's so thin, he barely can cast a shadow. So he's completely inappropriate. So we're going to take him. Then comes Wart, who's very ragged. He's barely put together, like a bunch of sticks with wires. So we're going to take him.
Feeble.
And then there's Feeble. Now, Feeble is unlike the others, because Feeble says, oh, and then there's Bullcalf, who's a strapping young man, perfect to be a soldier. At line 208, Bullcalf offers Bardolph money to buy him out of his service. And Bardolph says, go stand aside. And Moldy does the same. And he goes to stand aside. And Feeble says, by my troth I care not. A man can die but once. Do you see where I am? Line 220. We owe God a death. Remember, that's what the prince said to Falstaff at Shrewsbury? He was afraid of what was going to happen, and he said, wow, thou owest God a death. And Falstaff said, 'tis not due yet. And then he had his catechism of honor. But Feeble says, we owe God a death. I'll ne'er bear a base mind. And it be my destiny, so. And it be not so. No man is too good to serve his prince, and let it go which way it will, he that dies this year is quit for the next. Well said, thou art a good fellow. Faith, I'll bear no base mind. So he's willing to go, even though he's feeble. He's thin and useless and weak, but he's got no base mind, unlike the others. In the meantime, Bardolph says, aside to Falstaff, I have £3 to free Moldy and Bullcalf. Fine, then we're going to take these other hopeless characters. Just what he did in the last play. And when Shallow says they're not right for it, he says, give me the spirit. He pretends he cares about their spirit. All right, it's comical stuff, but I don't have time to read it all. At the end, Falstaff has a kind of prose soliloquy. They go out, and he says, line 281. I'm at Act 3, Scene 2, line 281. As I return, I will fetch off these justices. I do see the bottom of justice shallow. Lord, Lord, how subject we old men are to this vice of lying. This same starved justice hath done nothing but prate to me of the wildness of his youth, and the feats he hath done about Turnbull Street, and every third word a lie, duer paid to the hearer than the Turk's tribute. I do remember him at Clement's Inn, like a man made after supper of a cheese paring. When he was naked, he was for all the world like a forked radish, with a head fantastically carved upon it with a knife. I was so forlorn that his dimensions to any thick sight were invincible. That is, if you were a little bit thick-sighted, you couldn't see him. I was a very genius of famine, yet lecherous as a monkey, and the whores called him Mandrake. I came ever in the rearward of the fashion and sung those tunes to the over-scutched hussifs that he heard the carman whistle. In other words, he sang songs that he pretended were his own, but they were so popular and threadbare by then, they were sung already by carmen, truckers. And he swore they were his fancies or his good nights. And now is this vice's dagger, the dagger of the, remember we talked about the vice in the old play? The old morality plays, Richard III is a kind of vice. That is, he embodied all the vices, and he had a dagger of lath, a wooden fake dagger in those plays. So that's what Shallow was made of, just a thin stick. And now is this vice's dagger become a squire, and talks as familiarly of John of Gaunt as if he had been sworn brother to him. And I'll be sworn I never saw him but once at the tilt yard, and then he burst his head for crowding among the marshal's men. I saw it, and told John of Gaunt he beat his own name, for you might have thrust him in all his apparel into an eel skin. The case of a treble oboe was a mansion for him, a court. And now has he land and beefs. Well, I'll be acquainted with him if I return, and shall go hard, but I will make him a philosopher's 2 stones to me. I'm going to turn him into money-making things. If the young dace be a bait for the old pike, I see no reason in the law of nature, but I may snap at him. Let time shape, and there and then. I'm going to use him. I'm going to make money off him. And in fact, later he does borrow £1,000 from him. Okay. Act 4, Scene 1, the Archbishop announces that Northumberland has in fact decamped and gone north to the Scots. And so the rebels are together here, the Archbishop, Hastings, Mowbray, and to them comes Westmoreland, and they start to complain. The Archbishop says at line 69, we find our griefs heavier than our offenses. We are blaming the king. Everything he's done is wrong to us. We want redress of our grievances. And Westmoreland says, whenever yet was your appeal denied? Line 88. Wherein have you been galled by the king? What peer hath been suborned to grate on you, that you should seal this lawless, bloody book of forged rebellion with a seal divine and consecrate commotion's bitter edge? The Archbishop answers, my brother general, the Commonwealth, to brother born in household cruelty, I make my quarrel in particular. There is no need of any such redress, or if there were, it not belongs to you. Well, Mowbray says it's all of us. So they go back over the whole history, which refers back to what we know from the past. And then at line 140 or so, Westmoreland says, he's reminding them that everybody doted on Bolingbroke in those days. But now he says, here come I from our princely general, that's Lord John of Lancaster, to know your griefs, to tell you from his grace that he will give you audience, and wherein it shall appear that your demands are just, you shall enjoy them. Everything set off that might so much as think you enemies. We're going to discountenance, we're going to discard, what am I trying to say? We're going to ignore anything that you've done wrong and redress your specific grievances if you will then agree to peace. Mowbray, but he hath forced us to compel this offer, and it proceeds from policy, not love. It's a plot. It's not a real forgiveness. Westmoreland, Mowbray, you overween to take it so. This offer comes from mercy, not from fear. For lo, within a ken our army lies, upon mine honor all too confident to give admittance to a thought of fear. Our battle is more full of names than yours, our men more perfect in the use of arms, our armor all as strong, our cause the best. Then reason will our hearts should be as good. Then reason will our hearts should be as good. Say you not then our offer is compelled. We're not afraid of you. We're going to win this battle if we have to fight it. We're doing this out of mercy. Well, by my will we shall admit no parley, says Mowbray. He's against it. Westmoreland, that argues but the shame of your offense. A rotten case abides no handling. Hastings, hath the Prince John a full commission in very ample virtue of his father to hear and absolutely to determine of what conditions we shall stand upon? That is, does he have the power to decide these things? And Westmoreland says, that is intended in the general's name. I muse you make so slight a question. Obviously, he's a general. He can do it. Archbishop. He gives him a list of all their complaints. Presented to him. Westmoreland, this will I show the general. Please you, lords, in sight of both our battles we may meet, and either end in peace, which God so frame, or to the place of difference call the swords which must decide it. My lord, we will do so. Okay, they're agreeing. We're going to meet in front of the two armies, between them, so everybody can see us talking. And we'll either come to an agreement or not. If we don't, we separate and the armies clash. If we do come to an agreement, great, there'll be peace. He goes out, and Mowbray says, there is a thing within my bosom tells me that no conditions of our peace can stand. I have a bad feeling about this. Don't be afraid, says Hastings. We'll have such demands in our conditions that our peace will be firm because we're going to demand enough power so that we can enforce it. Yea, he's echoing now Worcester in the previous play. Line 189, yea, but our valuation shall be such that every slight and false derived cause, yea, every idle, nice and wanton reason shall to the king taste of this action. That were our royal faiths martyrs in love, we shall be winnowed with so rough a wind that even our corn shall seem as light as chaff, and good from bad find no partition. He's going to think anything that comes up, he's going to blame us because of this rebellion. The Archbishop, no, my lord, note this. The king is weary of dainty and such picking grievances. He's exhausted. He's too tired to fight. He's going to give us what we want. It's going to be fine. So the king is weak, says Hastings, and the Archbishop says yes. And therefore, if we make our atonement well, line 221, our peace will, like a broken limb united, grow stronger for the breaking. So then they meet. Act 4, Scene 2. Lord John of Lancaster says, you're a divine, why are you running a war here? Line 26, we'll start from there. Lancaster says to the Archbishop, you have ta'en up under the counterfeited zeal of God the subjects of his substitute, my father, and both against the peace of heaven and him have here upswarmed them. Archbishop, good my lord of Lancaster, I am not here against your father's peace, but as I told my lord of Westmoreland, the time misordered doth in common sense crowd us and crush us to this monstrous form to hold our safety up. We're doing it not to ruin the peace of the kingdom, but for our own safety. I sent your grace the parcels and particulars of our grief, the list of our complaints, the which hath been with scorn shoved from the court, whereon this hydra son of war is born, whose dangerous eyes may well be charmed asleep with grant of our most just and right desires, and true obedience of this madness cured, stoop tamely to the foot of majesty. We'll obey if we get what we want. We'll become obedient again. No accent that he uses the image of sleep. The king couldn't sleep because of the cares of the realm. Mowbray, if not, we ready are to try our fortunes to the last man, that is, by fighting. Hastings, and though we here fall down, we have supplies to second our attempt. This is a threat. If they miscarry, theirs shall second them, and so successive mischief shall be born, and heir from heir shall hold this quarrel up, whiles England shall have generation. This war is going to go on forever if you don't give us what we want. And of course it is going to go on until Richard III. Lancaster, you are too shallow, Hastings, much too shallow to sound the bottom of the after times. You don't know the future. Westmoreland, pleases your grace to answer them directly how far forth you do like their articles. Now, Lancaster says, I like them all. Everything they demanded, I accept. And do allow them well, and swear here by the honor of my blood, my father's purposes have been mistook, and some about him have too lavishly wrested his meaning and authority. My lord, these griefs shall be with speed redressed. Upon my soul they shall. He's swearing. What's he swearing to? These griefs will be redressed. That is, paid for, paid back. But he's doing what we call equivocating. They hear him saying, your complaints against us, we will take care of by giving you what you want. What we hear him saying is, the grief you have caused the kingdom by rising in rebellion is going to be paid by you. If this may, but he's not telling them that. If this may please you, discharge your powers unto their several counties, as we will ours. And here between the armies, let's drink together friendly and embrace, that all their eyes may bear those tokens home of our restored love and amity. Archbishop, I take your princely word for these redresses. I give it you, I'll give you my word, and will maintain my word, and thereupon I drink unto your grace. Hastings, go, captain, and deliver to the army this news of peace. Let them have pay and part. I know it will well please them. Hie thee, captain. Hurry, do it fast. And he goes off. to release the army of the rebels. To you, my noble lord of Westmoreland, they drink. I pledge your grace, and if you knew what pains I have bestowed to breed this present peace, says Westmoreland, you would drink freely. But my love to you shall show itself more openly hereafter. How much I love you is going to show itself in a little while. I do not doubt you. I am glad of it. Health to my lord and gentle cousin Mowbray. You wish me health in very happy season, for I am on the sudden something ill. He senses that something's wrong. He feels it. Against ill chances men are ever merry, but heaviness foreruns the good event. So if you feel bad, a good thing will come. If you're feeling good, then you look out for a bad thing. Therefore be merry, cuz, since sudden sorrow serves to say thus, some good thing comes tomorrow. Believe me, I'm passing light in spirit. Mowbray says, so much the worse if your own rule hold true. You're feeling light in spirit and good. That's bad news. If you're telling me that my ill feeling is preceding good news. Lancaster, 87, the word of peace is rendered. Hark how they shout. This had been cheerful after victory, would have been. A peace is of the nature of a conquest, for then both parties nobly are subdued and neither party loser. Go, my lord, and let our army be discharged too, as Westmoreland goes out, as if to tell the army to disperse. And good my lord, so please you, let our trains march by us, that we may peruse the men we should have coped withal. Let them march by us, so we can see who we would have been fighting. Go, good Lord Hastings, and ere they be dismissed, let them march by. I trust, lords, we shall lie tonight together. Westmoreland comes back. Now, cousin, wherefore stands our army still? Why aren't they running away, leaving? The leaders, having charge from you to stand, will not go off until they hear you speak. They know their duties. I told them not to leave, no matter who came to tell them to leave, if it wasn't me. Enter Hastings. My lord, our army is dispersed already. Like youthful steers unyoked, they take their courses east, west, north, south, or like a school broke up, each hurries toward his home and sporting place. They didn't come marching by. They all ran home. Good tidings, my lord Hastings, for the which I do arrest the traitor of high treason. And you, Lord Archbishop, and you, Lord Mowbray, of capital treason I attach you both. Mowbray, is this proceeding just and honorable? Is your assembly so? Says Westmoreland. Archbishop, will you thus break your faith? Lancaster, I pawned thee none. I promised you redress of these same grievances whereof you did complain, which by mine honor I will perform with a most Christian care. That is, the things that we did wrong that you're complaining about justly, we will redress, we'll take care of. But for you, rebels, look to taste the due meet for rebellion and such acts as yours. Most shallowly did you these arms commence, fondly brought here, and foolishly sent hence. Strike up our drums, pursue the scattered stray. God, and not we, hath safely fought today. Some guard these traitors to the block of death, treason's true bed and yielder up of breath. Now, I cannot tell you how many critics hate Prince John of Lancaster for doing this. What a hypocrite! What a liar! What a fake! How can he get away with this? No fair! Wrong. He's dealing with traitors. And treason can only be met with treason. That is, you cannot be expected to be treated with good faith if you have shown yourself to breach good faith. You get what you choose. You choose treason, you get it back. Dante does exactly the same thing in all of his Inferno and Purgatorio. The very thing that you did becomes the thing that you suffer. And that's what Shakespeare's doing here. The prince has saved the lives of all the men on both sides. He has made it seem that there is peace, so that everybody is now marching in unity behind the king. And England is saved from civil war, or in this case, this battle. And the traitors are punished for their treachery. So that it's a great accomplishment to have saved all those lives and never actually to have broken his word. The grievances will be redressed, but you're going to get what you deserve. All right, anybody want to argue with me and fight right now?
The rebels needed a lawyer to review that paper that they sent.
Yes, right.
Make sure that
You take a lawyer against the king, and you take your life in your hands, because this is a monarchy, right?
yeah.
All right, Act 3, Scene 4. I'm sorry, Act 4, Scene 3. I'm running out of time. I'm going to have to skip ahead. So we get Falstaff in exchange with Lancaster. He doesn't like Prince John of Lancaster because he doesn't drink. He has a whole long soliloquy about how great drink is. And all right, we have two big scenes to do. I might have to take a little time from Tuesday for this, but let's see what we can do. In Act 4, Scene 4, the king at line 19 tells Thomas of Clarence, Prince Hal's younger brother, one of them, how to relate to him, to serve him. He sees qualities in him. He wants the brothers to be obedient and to notice his moods and to just be wise and support him. Thou shalt prove a shelter to thy friends, a hoop of gold to bind thy brothers if you do that. And he's praising Prince Hal. And Clarence says, yes, I will, I'll do that. And the king is in grief because his son is headstrong and riot and not curbed, and he's got bad counselors. Warwick is on to the prince. He says at line 67, my gracious lord, you look beyond him quite. The prince but studies his companions, like a strange tongue wherein to gain the language. 'Tis needful that the most immodest word be looked upon and learned, which once attained, your highness knows comes to no further use, but to be known and hated. You learn the dirty words in another language in order not to accidentally say them. So like gross terms, the prince will in the perfectness of time cast off his followers, and their memory shall as a pattern or a measure live, by which his grace must meet the lives of others, turning past evils to advantages. He's learning how the people really are, and so he can treat them with justice and mercy and properly. 'Tis seldom when the bee doth leave her comb in the dead carrion. He's not so sure the prince is going to change. All right, Westmoreland brings good news. We didn't have to fight the battle. We're done with those guys. And then the Earl of Northumberland and the Lord Bardolph, that's not Bardolph, but the Lord Bardolph, his friend, with great power of English and Scots are by the Shreve of Yorkshire overthrown. The Sheriff of Yorkshire has defeated Northumberland and the Scots. So this is good news, but the king is ill because he's actually dying. So he can't really enjoy, but he should enjoy the news. He goes to bed and he says, set me the crown upon my pillow there. Clarence, his eye is hollow and he changes much. Less noise, less noise. So they go out, and the prince Hal comes in, and he's going to sit and watch by the king. The king's asleep, ill. The crown is on the pillow. Prince Hal is soliloquizing next to his father. Why doth the crown lie there upon his pillow, being so troublesome a bedfellow? O polished perturbation, golden care, that keeps the ports of slumber open wide to many a watchful night. Just what the king was saying. Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. Sleep with it now, yet not so sound and half so deeply sweet as he whose brow with homely biggin bound snores out the watch of night. O majesty, when thou dost pinch thy bearer, thou dost sit like a rich armor worn in the heat of day, that scaldst with safety. By his gates of breath there lies a downy feather which stirs not. He sees a feather and it's not stirring. He thinks his father's dead. Did he suspire, that light and weightless down perforce must move. My gracious Lord, my father. This sleep is sound indeed. This is a sleep that from this golden ringle hath divorced so many English kings. That is the only thing that divorces the English king from the crown is death. Thy due from me is tears and heavy sorrows of the blood, which nature, love, and filial tenderness shall, O dear Father, pay thee plenteously. My due from thee is this imperial crown, which, as immediate from thy place and blood, derives itself to me. He puts the crown on his own head. Lo, where it sits, which God shall guard, and put the whole world, and put the world's whole strength into one giant arm, it shall not force this lineal honor from me. This from thee will I to mine leave, as 'tis left to me. And he goes out. And the king isn't dead. He wakes up. Warwick, Gloucester, Clarence. The Prince of Wales, where is he? Let me see him. He is not here. The door's open. He's gone out. Where's the crown? The prince hath taken it hence. Go seek him out. Is he so hasty that he doth suppose my death? Find him, my Lord of Warwick. Chide him hither. Line 63. This part of his conjoins with my disease and helps to end me. See, sons, what things you are. How quickly nature falls into revolt when gold becomes her object. For this, the foolish, over-careful fathers have broke their sleep with thoughts, their brains with care, their bones with industry, and so on. Wherefore did he take away the crown? Line 87. Lo, where he comes. Come hither to me, Harry. Depart the chamber. Leave us here alone. Prince, I never thought to hear you speak again. The king says, they're alone now. Thy wish was father, Harry, to that thought. You wanted me dead. I stay too long by thee. I weary thee. Dost thou so hunger for mine empty chair that thou wilt needs invest thee with my honors before thy hour be ripe? O foolish youth, thou seekst the greatness that will overwhelm thee. Stay but a little, for my cloud of dignity is held from falling with so weak a wind that it will quickly drop. My day is dim. Thou hast stolen that which after some few hours were thine without offense, and at my death thou hast sealed up my expectation. Thy life did manifest thou lovest me not, and thou wilt have me die assured of it. Thou hidest 1,000 daggers in thy thoughts, which thou hast whetted on thy stony heart, to stab at half an hour of my life. What? Canst thou not forbear me half an hour? Then get thee gone and dig my grave thyself, and bid the merry bells ring to thine ear that thou art crowned, not that I am dead. Let all the tears that should be due my hearse be drops of balm to sanctify thy head. Only compound me with forgotten dust. Give that which gave thee life unto the worms. Pluck down my officers, break my decrees, for now a time is come to mock it for. Harry the Fifth is crowned. Up, vanity, down, royal state. All you sage counselors hence, and to the English court assemble now from every region apes of idleness. Now, neighbor confines, purge you of your scum. Have you a ruffian that will swear, drink, dance, revel the night, rob, murder, and commit the oldest sins, the newest kind of ways? Be happy, he will trouble you no more. England shall double gild his treble guilt. England shall give him office, honor, might. For the fifth Harry from curbed license plucks the muzzle of restraint, and the wild dog shall flesh his tooth on every innocent. Oh, my poor kingdom, sick with civil blows, when that my care could not withhold thy riots, what wilt thou do when riot is thy care? Oh, thou wilt be a wilderness again, peopled with wolves, thy old inhabitants. What's he saying? Falstaff's going to run things. Poins, pistol, dull tear sheet. Let alone the Worcesters and Hotspurs and Northumberlands and Archbishop of Yorks of the world. Finally, the prince speaks. Oh, pardon me, my liege, but for my tears, the most impediments unto my speech, I had forestalled this dear and deep rebuke, ere you with grief had spoke, and I had heard the course of it so far. There is your crown, and he that wears the crown immortally, meaning God, long guard it yours. If I affect it more than as your honor and your renown, let me no more from this obedience rise. He's kneeling. Which my most inward true and duteous spirit teacheth, this prostrate and exterior bending. God witness with me, when I here came in and found no course of breath within your majesty, how cold it struck my heart. If I do feign, that is, if I'm pretending, oh, let me in thy present wildness let me in my present wildness die, and never live to show the incredulous world the noble change that I have purposed. Coming to look on you, thinking you dead, and dead almost, my liege, to think you were, I spake unto this crown as having sense, and thus upbraided it. The care on thee depending hath fed upon the body of my father. Therefore, thou best of gold art worst of gold. Other, less fine in carat, is more precious, preserving life in medicine potable. But thou, most fine, most honored, most renowned, hast ate thy bearer up. Thus, my most royal liege, accusing it, I put it on my head to try with it, as with an enemy that had before my face murdered my father, the quarrel of a true inheritor. But if it did infect my blood with joy, or swell my thoughts to any strain of pride, if any rebel or vain spirit of mine did with the least affection of a welcome give entertainment to the might of it, let God forever keep it from my head, and make me as the poorest vassal is that doth with awe and terror kneel to it. King, O my son, God put it in thy mind to take it hence, that thou mightst win the more thy father's love, pleading so wisely in excuse of it. Come hither, Harry, sit thou by my bed, and here I think the very latest counsel that ever I shall breathe. God knows, my son, by what bypaths and indirect crooked ways I met this crown, and I myself know well how troublesome it sat upon my head. To thee it shall descend with better quiet, better opinion, better confirmation, for all the soil of the achievement goes with me into the earth. It seemed in me but as an honor snatched with boisterous hand, and I had many living to upbraid my gain of it by their assistance, which daily grew to quarrel and to bloodshed, wounding supposed peace. All these bold fears thou seest with peril I have answered, for all my reign hath been but as a scene acting that argument. All my whole reign has been fighting down the rebels who thought of me as having stolen the crown and thought of themselves as helping me to it, and therefore having the right to take it back if they didn't like what I was doing. And now my death changes the mode. For what in time was purchased falls upon thee in a more fairer sort. So thou the garland wearest successively. That is, you inherit it. You're not stealing it. Yet though thou standst more sure than I could do, thou art not firm enough, since griefs are green. And all my friends which thou must make thy friends have but their stings and teeth newly ta'en out, by whose fell working I was first advanced, and by whose power I well might lodge a fear to be again displaced. Which, to avoid, I cut them off, and had a purpose now to lead out many to the Holy Land, lest rest and lying still might make them look too near unto my state. Therefore, my Harry, be it thy course to busy giddy minds with foreign quarrels, that action hence borne out may waste the memory of the former days. More would I, but my lungs are wasted so that strength of speech is utterly denied me. How I came by the crown, O God, forgive, and grant it may with thee in true peace live. My gracious liege, says the prince, you won it, wore it, kept it, gave it me, then plain and right must my possession be, which I, with more than with a common pain, gainst all the world will rightfully maintain. In come the brothers. What's the room where I fainted? It's called Jerusalem, says Warwick. Laud be to God, says the king, 235. Even there my life must end. It hath been prophesied to me many years, I should not die, but in Jerusalem, which vainly I suppose the Holy Land. But bear me to that chamber, there I'll lie. In that Jerusalem shall Harry die. Oh, yeah. Okay. Questions? We have 4 minutes. I'm not going to start the next scene. I'm going to finish it on Tuesday because I have 2 days for Henry V. So we'll start Henry V with Act 5, Scene 1 here. And I'll try to get through that play in 2 days. But if you have questions, we have a couple minutes. Yes?
So do you believe Hal was convincing?
Absolutely. You know why? It's Shakespeare's method. How could I know otherwise? He doesn't lie to us when he tells us what he says in soliloquy. What he tells his father he was grappling with the crown is exactly what he said to us. There's no difference there. So we would have no way, any other interpretation would be to invent it for ourselves. Now, if we're cynical, if we come to this place cynically, and we say, no man could mean that, nobody could be that good, right? We won't believe him, so then what do we have to do? We have to substitute a whole story and a whole plot and a whole character of our own invention. And we have to mangle the words of the play to fit it. And that's what plenty of critics do, many. But Shakespeare's method is to tell us what he wants us to know. And the king is persuaded, and we are persuaded, not that we needed persuasion, because we've seen it all along. It's what he planned to do from the start. So yes, I believe it.
How do you think Bolingbroke, as Henry IV, comes out in all of this? Was he really...
Utterly mixed, the way Richard did. So Richard, remember, started with complete right, but no merit. And he blew it over and over and over until he was deposed. And then at the last minute of his life, he finally found in himself a little real action, a little real merit to fight against the murderers of him, the king. Now, Bolingbroke rose to power out of the necessity to restore England to some civility, some semblance of peace and justice and property rights and all the rest of it. So it had to happen, but he wasn't the rightful heir to the throne, or at least he wasn't. He may have been the rightful heir to the throne if Richard had died, but he wasn't. It wasn't rightful to take the crown from a rightful king, but it was necessary. So you have this. Shakespeare is so, profoundly recognizes the paradox of life and the paradox of this historical situation. And we're all faced with that all the time. You know, the right thing to do would be this, but practically it would be disastrous. And the practical thing to do is that, but that's morally wrong. Well then, how morally wrong are you willing to be practically right? And how much do you know the future to make your practice justified when it's immoral? So the prince is going to try to reunite those two opposite paradoxical things that got split because of Richard's bad rule. And he's going to not only inherit the crown rightfully from his father, but he's going to try to be a good king, not like Richard, and unite England and heal it. And he does succeed at that for a short period, 10 years, and then he dies young. And so then it all falls apart again because the actual fall isn't finally expiated until Richard III, right? Until the end of Richard III. But the play puts us without simple answers. It shows us that in fact life is complex and requires hard choices. And we're given these characters. Falstaff is given his character, Bardolph is given his character, Northumberland is given his, Hotspur is given his. What do you do with it? And there's this overarching sense that whoever you are bound in duty and duty to God to be loyal to the king, unless the king is destroying things. And then you're bound to be loyal, more importantly, to the Commonwealth. The real hero of all these plays is the Commonwealth of England. And Prince Hal stands for the Commonwealth. And Henry IV did too. Richard was the enemy of the Commonwealth. And the later kings will be the enemy of the Commonwealth, reaching its peak in Richard III, until Henry VII does another kind of restoration. Only Shakespeare's already written that one, and he's written it in an earlier style. Now we're in a much profounder, much richer, much more nuanced and complex style. But the idea is that the Commonwealth must be healed. And the prince's whole mission is to do that. And his way of doing it is by pretending to be the opposite of what he is, to win over the lower classes, to win over the rebels, to take everybody by surprise at how good he is, and make them grateful to have him instead of anybody else. And it works, except for a couple of rebels, which we'll see next week. But he deals with them pretty quickly, because he's got loyal people working for him. I can't believe we only made it to Act 5, Scene 1, but we'll finish the play in the first half hour next week, and then we'll turn to Henry V. So read on to Henry V.